Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with a video on the new builds for all the ADCs in patch 6.2. Of course, in 6.2 we've gotten a lot of item changes, especially in the crit item department. So you have the Bloodthirster change, Essence Weaver change, Navori change, a ton of these changes to the items. So I'm gonna go through what I think are viable builds in terms of on hit, in terms of crit, in terms of different builds. I'm gonna try to cover all the viable builds for ADCs that I think will be built, and of course we're gonna be making videos on them in time to come throughout the next couple of patches as well. So first up, I'm going to cover a couple of things. Number one, I'm not going to be explaining any of the on-hit builds because the on-hit builds pretty much stay the same from last patch. And the only real question is, so with the buff to crit items, will ADC still want to build the on-hit build? Now, I basically feel that yes, probably in some scenarios you still want to build the on-hit build, but I think in the vast majority of scenarios, crit is going to be better and you rarely want to build on-hit. Now, the second thing I kind of want to go over is the new item soul transfer. So there's two discussion points that I kind of want to bring up at the very beginning because this is going to be kind of the basis of the rest of the video. So basically, soul transfer is a new item, right? What it gives you is 25 AD, 25% crit, and 30% attack speed. And then when you actually crit against an enemy champion or an epic monster, so it does not work on minions, it does not work on other regular jungle monsters like buffs or the chickens, for example, only works on epic monsters like dragons, baron, or enemy champions. You summon a clone, lasting 4 seconds to attack nearby enemies. The clone will get 25% of your AD, and also it will get 30% of your crit rate as attack speed, and you can have up to 2 clones. If you get too far from the clones, they will despawn. Alright, so I have played about 5 games of ADC before making this video, and I have actually tried soul transfer. You will actually see this in the video I'll release in the upcoming days on Jinx, where I tried soul transfer on Jinx. Now, I have two basically discussion points to make when it comes to soul transfer. Right, so firstly, I want to compare soul transfer to Runan's Hurricane, and secondly, I want to compare soul transfer to Magnetic Blaster. Now, I have to say, after testing soul transfer myself, I personally don't think it's I think it's a little bit of an underwhelming item, because a lot of the issue is like a couple of things, right? Firstly, fitting it in the build in the first place, right? Because soul transfer is, to me, directly competing with Magnetic Blaster, either as a second item or if not later in the build. Now, I say later in the build because I tried soul transfer as a second item. I didn't really think it's very impactful as a second item because the stat line that it gives you is just not very good. I mean, the stat line is comparable to Magnetic Blaster, for example. In terms of both AD and attack speed, they are almost identical, but the passive of Blaster is just better for a second item because you get the extra range, you get the extra wave clear, you also get the extra burst damage. Whereas with soul transfer, I feel this is more of like a fourth item situation. And why I say fourth item is because let's say you get Bloodthirster first item, right? You don't want to go for soul transfer second item because it's not very good as a second item in my opinion. Number two is that IE and Mole Reminder are probably more important as your second and third item. Normally those are your third and fourth item, but seeing as you can't really get this as a second item, you probably don't want to delay either one to later on. Like, you don't want to go for IE second item, soul transfer third item, and delay your armor pen to last. Or the opposite is you don't want to go armor pen as your second item and then delay IE to last and have soul transfer third. So just by default, soul transfer will be kicked to the final item slot, going for prioritizing IE and Mole Reminder. Right. Notwithstanding, you still want to be comparing Soul Transfer to Magnetic Blaster, right? So they're generally competing for the same spots because for most standard ADC builds, you'll go BT and then into Blaster and then IE as well as Mole Reminder. So generally you're competing with Blaster. Now personally, I initially thought that soul transfer would be better, right? Because it's more DPS overall. But I think just the utility of Blaster with the wave clear, with the burst damage, as well as with the extra range, for me currently seems better. So I'm not sure if soul transfer is going to get a buff. I'm not sure how it's going to fit into people's builds, if they're going to have space for it, if they want to go 125% crit to get soul transfer, which I don't think is probably the optimal play. But I'm struggling to see where soul transfer fits in. I'll talk a little bit more about that on individual champion builds. But for now, I don't think soul transfer is that good of an item. The second point of comparison is soul transfer versus Runan's Hurricane, right? So if you kind of think about it, Runan's allows you to attack 3 people at the same time. Soul transfer kind of spawns 2 mini U's that's going to attack other people as well. So I decided to go into practice tool and test out Soul Transfer versus Runan's Hurricane. So I tried BT's into Soul Transfer or BT into Runan's Hurricane. I also tried BT into Soul Transfer into IE and BT into Soul Transfer into Runan's Hurricane and into IE, right? So basically 2 items and 3 items, right? Because I think that at 5 items, with the stats you get, Soul Transfer is probably gonna outclass Runan's Hurricane. I say probably because it's not even a guarantee, but basically in all instances, Runan's Hurricane ends up dealing more damage than Soul Transfer at both 2 and 3 items. I'm not sure if at 5 items Soul Transfer will do more damage than Runan's, but the damage spread of Runan's is better, right? So Runan's kind of outclasses Soul Transfer at the moment, which is another reason why I think it's just a waste to build Soul Transfer for the most part, right? So anyways, with all that out the way, talking about the new item Soul Transfer, now let's actually get into the meat of it, into all of the builds. So first off, this is Vayne's on-hit build, nothing really changes here. Now Vayne's crit build is one that I kind of debated on a lot, because you really want attack speed items at the start, right? And really the only options you kind of have is, like, it used to be Blaster into Storm Razor, but now Storm Razor gets subsumed into Blaster, so I guess you're gonna go for Blaster as the first item. Vayne might be the only champion that builds Phantom Dancer just because of how much attack speed it gives, and then you probably still want to go for BT just because of the huge stat line and the shieldable passive, as well as IE because you already have max crit, and then your Twin Guard, right? So last time you used to be able to fit Triforce in the build, something like this. So this could be another viable build. BT into Blaster and then Triforce and then the 2 other crit items. I don't think you need more Reminder on Vayne though. But kind of the issue with that is that you're lacking attack speed, right? So this individual did make up for it by going for attack speed boots at the beginning. So maybe this is going to be the Vayne build, going for attack speed boots and then into Bloodthirster could be the way to go. So a bit similar to a Caitlyn build, but going for attack speed boots instead, that could be the way as well. As I said, this is all very preliminary, so there's no real, like, concrete builds for most champions. So with Jinx, you're pretty much going to go for the standard build. As I said, I tried the Soul Transfer, and I personally don't really like it all that much. I think probably a Blaster is going to be better in this spot, something like this, which is basically back to the same Jinx build, or Soul Transfer probably needs to go later, right? So it probably needs to go to the end, right? Because currently I don't think it's really good as an early game item. I think it's probably better as a later game item. So maybe it could look like this, right? So next up, we're gonna talk about the on-hit build. Right. So on-hit build, pretty standard. As I said, I'm not gonna discuss it too much. And then we're gonna go to Jhin. So Jhin basically is gonna go to his normal build, but it just basically got better, right? Collector got buffed. Blaster now has extra burst damage on it, so it's just better for Jhin. Now the only real change is that these two are swappable, and I think with the burst damage on Blaster, you can actually put it earlier now, because one of the reasons why you used to go IE earlier is because Blaster you lack damage with Blaster, but Blaster now getting 25 AD, getting the burst damage from Storm Razor makes it a lot better, so probably this is going to be the better build path. The other option you have is to go for BT on Jhin, although I do think Collector is always going to be better, and Jin's one of the few champions that makes use of Collector very well. Now Kai'Sa probably is going to have 3 builds, so once again you have the crit build, and I think on Kai'Sa, I do think Soul Transfer probably is going to actually be good on Kai'Sa, because I don't think Kai'Sa really likes Magnetic Blaster, so I think this might be Kai'Sa's crit build. And then of course you have Kai'Sa's on hit build, which is the same from last patch, and then you also have AP, which is also the same from last patch. I'm really interested in trying out this crit build with Soul Transfer last item. Nilah, I think both in the ADC role as well as the jungle, probably still wants to stay with Navori as a second item, because I mean, you could go for Collector, but I just don't like Collector on Nilah personally, so I'm not going to go for that. But if you guys want to go for it, you can. But of course, Navori did get buffed as well, so it's going to help you out quite a bit. And then next up you have Lucian. Now Lucian is probably the champion. Lucian and Zeri are kind of the 2 champions that I'm the most unsure of in terms of build, right? So with Lucian, I think there are a couple of options, right? So first off, your first item, should it be Essence Weaver or should it be Bloodthirster, right? Because with Essence Weaver you get basically the old Charge Blade passive, but you also get AD and all the good stats, right? And then secondly, is your second item. Do you want to go for Magnetic Blaster or do you want to go for Navori? So I feel that Lucian currently has 4 build variations, which is Essence Weaver into Magnetic Blaster, Essence Weaver into Navori, and also BT into Blaster and BT into Navori. Right? Why BT over Essence Weaver? Now, Essence Weaver is a Dream Lucian item, right? You get the Charge Blade passive, you get pretty nice stats, but I just cannot get over how strong Bloodthirster is as an item, right? It's like 50 AD, 15% attack speed, you get the lifeline passive, and you get basically 12% physical vamp, right? It's just too amazing of an item. And you compare price, right? It's 3,000 gold and 3,000 gold. So I can see a world where BT just outclasses Essence Reaver. Now currently everyone's going for Essence Reaver, I think because of the novelty of it, but I'm not sure in the long run is BT going to be better than Essence Reaver. I can definitely see a scenario where it is, and I think that ER might be, I wouldn't say a bait item, but it might be inferior to going for to Bloodthirster, right? Because Bloodthirster is just too insane of an item, right? So there is the top rank build, which kind of eliminates my conundrum of whether or not to go for Quick Blades or Blaster by just going for both, right? So you go ER into Navori into Blaster and then into Mole Reminder, and you even go for IE with 125% crit. Um, yeah, and you can also of course swap Essence Reaver for BT instead. So technically now Lucian has like 6 build variations. I am definitely going to try all of them out in ranked and make videos on at least a couple of them and kind of see which one works and which one doesn't. But next champion is going to be Tristana. Now I think Tristana could benefit from soul transfers and last item, but just playing Tristana over the last couple of years, I think that Blaster is just a really insane item for Tristana. She loves that range, and you know, now with that burst damage as well, I honestly I can see her going for soul transfer over Blaster as the last item, but I think that currently the Blaster is just a really good item for Tristana, right? So Tristana also has an on-hit build, which looks like this. And then next up we have Xayah. Now Xayah doesn't really go for IE anymore, so going for Blaster just helps. You can swap in IE, and I don't see Xayah going for Soul Transfer personally. Now Twitch actually has 3 builds, so let's first talk about the on-hit build. So on-hit build, pretty standard build. AP gets pretty interesting because now with the buff to Liandry's Torment, Twitch used to have an AP build that focused on Liandry's Torment, like going for Liandry's Torment as a second item. So it used to go something like this, right? So my main debate is whether or not I should go Liandry second or Runan's second, right? Because on one hand, Liandry second helps you do a lot more single target damage. On the other hand, going for Runan second is going to help you spread your poison. Now I'm thinking probably Liandry second is better because there's no point going for Nashers into Runans and having 0 damage, right? Probably Nashers into Liandry's is probably better. I mean, there is a debate of going Runans into Liandry's and then into Nashers, but I kind of don't really like how that goes. Last item is a debate between Deathcap and Infinity Orb, because honestly, with the amount of poison damage you will do, a lot of people will actually end up dying to the Infinity Orb poison, so I think Infinity Orb could be a good last item instead of Deathcap. Definitely going to try this one out. It's going to be fun. So with the crit build, it's very similar situation to Jinx, right? So his crit build is going to look very similar to Jinx. So again, Soul Transfer probably goes to the end, if anything. I think Twitch could be someone who works very well with Soul Transfer. Of course, Blaster as a third item could be really good as well. So it's kind of a little bit similar to Jinx. And honestly, a lot of champions, right? Like Jinx, Ashe, Varus, crit build, probably all is going to look around the same. So next up, Corki. Corki is someone who doesn't really have many complications with this. It's probably going to look something like this. Now, something to note is that since Triforce actually gives you Spellblade, yeah, it gives you the Spellblade passive here. Yeah, there, the Spellblade passive. You cannot actually build that together with Essence Reaver because it also gives you Spellblade passive, since the passives do not stack, right? They are the same passive. Whereas last time with Charge Blade, you used to be able to go for both of them. So now if you want to go for Essence Reaver, you can't go for Triforce, which leads me to believe that probably this is going to be the better build, and Essence Reaver probably is not going to be built on Corki. So MF has 3 viable builds. First off is the 100% crit build. Probably this is going to be the way to go. Bloodthirster first item into Collector, and then the rest of the crit items. Of course, MF is not an attack speed ADC, so she's not going to benefit from items like Soul Transfer. Now, I think there is a chance that Blaster could be a second item as well, because Blaster seems like a pretty decent item right now. Then you of course have Lethality, just going for full Lethality build, and then of course you have Duskblade into crit, looking something like this. And then with Zeri, once again, I said I'm pretty unsure of what you want to go for with Zeri, because I think Zeri currently has a couple viable builds, right? So firstly, you have this build where you basically go for Runan's second, and then just to fill up space at the end, you go for Quick Blades, which is nice to get a lower cooldown on your E, but now with the bonus damage, you're going to do more damage on your Q as well. right? Then there is this other build, which is the ER build, which is basically, this used to be the build that gives you the charge blade, but now kind of issue with this build is you get no attack speed. You only get 15% attack speed from here, and you don't really have attack speed, so you're gonna have to go attack speed boots instead, and then you go BT into Essence Reaver, which looks really weird because Essence Reaver is typically a first item, but this is basically the charge blade substitute. So you go for BT into charge blade, and I'm sorry, not charge blade, into Essence Reaver. Charge blade doesn't exist anymore, and then into the rest of the crit items. So the top players are kind of going for, yeah, a mix of builds, and the top players are actually going for Soul Transfer into Runa's Hurricane. Like, this is a strange build, like no IE build. Maybe that will work, I'm not sure. The patch is kind of too early, and Zeri of course also has an on-hit build, so looking something like this. Although I think with the new crit scaling on Zeri, on-hit Zeri might be dead. Not too sure. Now Draven, as usual, goes for the same build, but of course with the runes you can go for Lethal Tempo, you can go for Press the Attack, or you can go for Conqueror. Not much has changed with Draven. Now Ashe, of course, has the crit build as well, the similar one to Jinx or to Twitch, but you can of course remove Soul Transfer and go for Blaster as a third item instead. That could also be the way. As I said, I'm not too sure how good Soul Transfer is compared to Blaster, which is why I did the comparison at the start. I personally think Blaster is probably better, but I think on some of these like backline, front to back, auto attack focus ADCs, probably going for Soul Transfer last item could be very beneficial. We'll have to see about that. And then of course Ashe also has a on-hit build. If I can actually click it, and there could also be a possible build where you go BT into on-hits, considering how strong BT is. We'll kind of see how that goes. Now Varus of course has the most build diversity. Now firstly I want to cover Varus's crit build. It's probably going to look something along these lines, right? Along the lines of like the Ashe build, the Jinx build, and the Twitch build. Probably you're gonna obviously start off with the Bloodthirster. You're probably gonna go for Runans to spread your blight, and then probably gonna look something like this, right? So now with that, there's also lethality. It's now pretty straightforward. You can't go for Essence Reaver anymore, so you're gonna have to go for just full lethality, right? It's just a full lethality build, nothing too fancy here. On hit probably looks about the same, and then you have AP also looks about the same, so kind of depending on what you want. Ezreal, same build, nothing has really changed. Conqueror or Press the Attack depending on your preference. And then you have Samira, who, for some champions like Samira, the combination of Shield Bow and Bloodthirster just optimizes her build, because previously you had to debate between Shield Bow or Bloodthirster and give up Bloodthirster's damage for Shield Bow's safety. Now you get a 2-in-1, and Samira's build is just pretty straightforward. It's just going to look like this. Then you have Sivir. Now Sivir, of course, benefits a lot from Navori, and really your only choice is whether or not to go for IE. Basically, it's whether you go IE or Blaster as a third item. Other than that, it's not too complicated. Maybe you could go for Soul Transfer last item and go to 125% crit. I'm not sure. No one is really doing that right now, and this is probably going to be how the build looks like. Of course, the buff to Navori is huge for Sivir, especially Xayah, champions like those. Right, and then you have Caitlyn. Now Caitlyn, once again, is another one of those champions that is super optimized now because of the combination of Bloodthirster and Shield Bow. Also, the combination of Storm Razor into Blaster means that this is pretty much going to be Caitlyn's, I'm not going to say only viable build, but it's basically going to be Caitlyn's main crit build. I can't really foresee her building anything else. And then of course you also have not there, but you also have the on-hit build of Caitlyn. I'm not sure if people are actually going to build on hit on ADCs anymore. And finally, you have Kalista, who only really has an on hit build because Kalista doesn't actually build crit. So for Kalista, the build's probably going to remain about the same. Of course, you do have some build diversity in terms of whether you go for Molar Reminder or Terminus, things like that. But with all that out of the way, stay tuned for more ADC videos to come and just more videos to come in general. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.